All right, welcome everyone. Good morning. We are starting today with Shrimad Bhagavata Mahapurana, Book 10, first half, Discourse 14. Apologies if I have to cough or something a little bit. I actually have COVID right now, fairly mild, but I do have a bit of a cough, or if I sound hoarse or anything. So happy to be able to do this from home. Discourse 14, the context of this is that Brahma has just surrendered to Krishna after having been essentially challenged him to a contest of Maya of sorts and badly lost, discovering that Krishna does indeed seem to be a Purana avatar, which Brahma wasn't sure about until this point. Brahma prayed, "I offer my praises, O praiseworthy Lord, to you, the son of a cowherd, with tender feet, and clad in a costume bright as lightning, endowed with a personality dark as a rainy cloud, a face resplendent with earrings made of gunja seeds, and a crest of peacock feathers, and with a garland of sylvan flowers, and graced with a morsel of food, a cane, a horn, a flute, and other emblems carried in your hands. Even I, Brahma, cannot truly comprehend with a mind turned inward the glory, O Lord, even of this personality of yours, the instrument of your grace on me, shaped according to the will of your devotees, and certainly not a product of gross elements, much less directly of yourself, consisting, as your true self does, of Satchidanandam, of truth, consciousness, and bliss. O invincible Lord, you stand generally conquered in the three worlds by them who spend their time solely in venerating, with their body, speech, and mind, your stories, spontaneously told by saints who come visiting, and fallen on their ears without effort on their part, remaining at their own abode, and totally giving up all effort at attaining spiritual enlightenment. In the case, however, of those who, neglecting devotion, the fountainhead of all blessings, to you, O Almighty Lord, take pains to attain mere spiritual enlightenment, such enlightenment ultimately proves to be no more than a source of exertion alone, as is the case with those who are engaged in pounding the mere coarse husk without containing the actual grain or seed. Of yore, O infinite Lord, many a striver adept in numerous yogas in this world, who resigned their activity to you, realized their true nature through devotion, acquired by their own actions and developed by hearing your stories, and forthwith attained your supreme state, O immortal Lord. The glory, O perfect one, of your being, devoid of attributes, can all the same be realized by the pure-hearted, who have turned their senses inward, through the direct perception of their mind, cast into the mold of the self to the exclusion of specific molds, and free from objectivity, as a self-effulgent entity, and not otherwise. Who have succeeded in reckoning the attributes of the Lord in you, the controller of the three gunas, come down to the material plane for the good of this world? None, not even they by whom, exceptionally clever as they are, might have been counted the particles of dust on the earth, the dewdrops in the air, or the rays of luminaries in the heavens. He has his share insured in the boon of final moksha, even if he has no use for it and never claims it, who lives on in this world eagerly looking forward to your grace, simply enjoying the fruit of his own actions in a detached manner, and bowing to you with his heart, speech, and body. Look at my wickedness, O Lord, and that I sought to witness my own glory, having cast a spell even on you, the infinite Lord, the cause of all, the supreme spirit, the deluder of deluders. Indeed, of what account am I before you, any more than a flame before a fire from which it has emanated? Therefore, O immortal Lord, forgive the fault of mine, a product of Rajoguna, who accounted myself the Almighty Lord independent of you, fool that I was, with my eyes blinded by crass ignorance in the shape of the egotistic notion that I am the birthless creator, thinking that this fellow deserves your pity, having a protector in yourself. Invested with a body possessing a height of 7 spans and presiding over this cosmic egg, frail as a pitcher and having an 8-fold sheath of the Prakriti, Mahatattva, ego, ether, air, fire, water, and earth, I stand nowhere when compared to the glory of your infinite being, whose pores resemble air holes where the passage of countless such cosmic eggs that float in them like atoms. Does the kicking up of heels on the part of a fetus constitute an offense against the mother, O Lord, who are above sense perception? Is there anything whatsoever, falling within the range of positive or negative terms, outside your bowels? Surely the statement that the birthless creator actually sprang from the lotus at the navel of Lord Narayana reposing on the deluge water at the time of the dissolution of the three worlds is certainly not untrue. Have I not, under the circumstance, come out of you, O Almighty Lord? Are you not actually Narayana, since you are the soul of all embodied beings? You are their prompter as well as the witness of all creatures. Lord Narayana, so called because he has his abode in things produced out of Nara, as well as in the waters evolved out of him, constitutes a form of yours. Your appearing in a finite form is not true. It is a mere sport of yours. If that form of yours, constituting the support of the world, stays in water, why was it not perceived by me, O Almighty Lord, that very time? Referring to the time when he searched for it in the water that we read about much earlier in the Bhagavatam. Or why was it clearly seen in the heart at that very moment? Again, referring to a moment when he found the form of Lord Narayana in his own heart in meditation, after failing to find it searching the waters. And why was it not beheld by me instantaneously again? It was in this very avatarana of yours, O dispeller of delusion, that the undoubtedly illusory character of this entire externally visible universe was actually revealed by you within your abdomen before your mother. As all this, including your own self, appears within your abdomen, so does all this appear in this universe outside yourself too. Is this possible in you except through your Maya? Was not the illusory character of all this, other than yourself, revealed to me by yourself this very day? At first, you alone existed. After that, you appeared in the form of your companions in Vraja, as well as of the calves and all other paraphernalia. Then you appeared in as many four-armed forms, waited upon by all categories, accompanied by myself. Then again, you became as many universes, and now remain as the infinite Brahman without a second. This is summarizing the visions revealed to Brahma in the discourse before this one. In the eyes of those who are ignorant of your supreme nature, you are the spirit identified with Prakriti, and having spread Maya by your own self, appear as myself for the purpose of creation, as yourself, standing before me for the sake of preservation, and as the three-eyed Lord Shiva for the dissolution of the universe. In order to curb the foolish pride of the wicked, O Lord, as well as for showering your grace on the righteous, O maker of the universe, you appear among the gods, the rishis, and even so among human beings, as well as among the beasts and birds, and even among aquatic creatures, although you are birthless, O Master. When you engage in leelas, spreading the curtain of your yoga maya, O infinite Lord, who can know of your activities in the three worlds as to where or how or when they come into play and what is their number, O Supreme Spirit, O Master of Yoga? Therefore, appearing and vanishing in your infinite self, the embodiment of eternal bliss and consciousness, by virtue of your Maya, this entire universe, which is unreal by nature like a dream, devoid of intelligence and full of abundant and endless misery, appears as real. You are the one self, the most ancient person, real, self-luminous, infinite, the very first, eternal, imperishable, full of uninterrupted bliss, taintless, perfect, secondless, devoid of all adjuncts and immortal. They cross, as it were, the false ocean of mundane existence, who perceive through the penetrating eye of wisdom, obtained from the sun-like Guru, you, as such, the very self of all living beings, as the self of their own self. In the eye of those who fail to perceive the self and its true character, the whole universe is evolved through that very ignorance, and again it disappears as a result of spiritual enlightenment, even as the body of a serpent appears and disappears in a rope through ignorance of its real nature and knowledge of its real nature. Bondage in the form of mundane existence and release from it, both are, as a matter of fact, names given through ignorance. In relation to the absolute transcendent self consisting of eternal consciousness, When investigated, they have no existence separate from the self, which is truth and consciousness combined, or being and consciousness combined, any more than day and night have separate existences in relation to the sun. Oh, such is the folly of the ignorant folk that regarding you, their very self, as other, and their body, etc., as their self, they look for the self outside. In this psychophysical organism, O infinite Lord, the wise indeed seek you alone, rejecting that which is other than you. Could even men of correct judgment perceive the rope lying near at hand without negating the snake, though non-existent? Nevertheless, O self-effulgent Lord, he alone who is blessed with an iota of grace of thy lotus feet can in fact realize the essence of your glory. None other can do so, even though investigating it for a long time all alone. Therefore, O Lord, may that great fortune be mine, wherefore in this or any other life, even among the subhuman creatures, I may turn out to be any one of your devotees, and lovingly tend your feet, tender as a fresh leaf. O highly blessed are the cows and gopis of Vraja, the nectar-like milk of whose udders and breasts was gladly sucked to your heart's content by you in the form of their calves and their sons, O Almighty Lord, to whose gratification sacrifices have not proved equal even to this day. Wonderful and remarkable is the fortune and good luck of the inhabitants of Raja ruled over by Nanda, the chief of cowherds, whose near and dear one is Sri Krishna, the all-perfect eternal Brahman, the embodiment of supreme bliss. Let the greatness of fortune of these gopas, however, be left aside for the time being, O immortal Lord. Even we 11 alone are highly blessed indeed, in that through the cups of the Indriyas of these, we, Lord Shiva and others, repeatedly drink the nectar-like and inebriating honey of your lotus feet. So the reference to we 11 seems to be a reference to the names of the deities presiding over the 10 Indriyas in the mind, which are Brahma speaking kind of as the collective of them all, and also especially as Prajapati. The 11 being the collective of the Digdevatas, who preside over the auditory sense and the directions. The wind god Vayu presiding over the tactile sense, the sun god Surya presiding over the sense of sight, Varuna, the god of water, presiding over the sense of taste, the Ashwini Kumaras presiding together over the olfactory sense, Agni, the god of fire, presiding over the organ of speech, Indriya, the ruler of the Devas, presiding over the hands, Upendra, presiding over the feet, who is Vamana avatar, Mitra, Deva, presiding over the organ of defecation or elimination generally, Prajapati, who is a form of Brahma himself, hence including himself as we, presiding over the organ of generation and the reproductive system generally, as the creator, and the moon god, Soma Deva, presiding over the mind. That will be my greatest fortune, whereby my birth is ensured in any species whatsoever on this earth, much more so in Gokula, and still more in the woodland of Vrindavana, with the privilege of bathing in the dust of feet of any of the residents of Raja, whose life and everything, of course, is Lord Sri Krishna, the bestower of liberation, the dust of whose feet, as a matter of fact, is only being sought after by the Srutis, even to this day. Our mind is puzzled to think where and what reward, other than yourself, the embodiment of all rewards, will even you bestow on these inhabitants of Raja, whose house, wealth, near and dear ones, body, sons, life, and mind exist for you, when even Putana with her family was called to your presence alone, O self-effulgent Lord, by virtue of her merely putting on a loving guise, even though her intent was to kill Krishna. Attachment, etc., play the role of robbers. The house serves as a prison, and infatuation acts as a fetter, only so long as we do not become your devotees, O Krishna. In order to swell the volume of joy of people that have sought refuge in you, O Lord, you imitate the ways of the world on the earth, though you have no connection with the world. Let those alone who claim to know you, know you. What is to be gained by talking much? Your glory, O Lord, does not lie within the reach of my mind, body, and speech. Give me leave, O Krishna. You know everything, O omniscient Lord. You alone are the protector of the worlds. This world, including this my body, is hereby offered to you. O glorious Krishna, who like the sun bring joy to the lotus of Vrishni's race, and like the moon swell the ocean in the form of the earth, referring to, of course, the rising of the tides. The gods, the brahmanas, and the cows, the dispeller of the darkness of pseudo-religion, the enemy of the rakshasas on earth, O Lord, who are worthy of adoration for all, including the sun god, let my salutations be to you till the end of the cycle. Essentially meaning till the end of my life. Sri Shuka continued, having thus glorified Sri Krishna, the infinite Lord, having thus glorified Sri Krishna, the infinite Lord, Brahma, the creator of the universe, went round him as a mark of respect thrice, and bowing at his feet, returned to his realm of Brahmaloka, which is adored by all. Then, granting leave to Brahma the self-born, the Lord brought back the calves that stood grazing as before, that had been stolen by Brahma, to the riverbank of his choice, which he had selected for his lunch with the Gopa boys, and where his companions were waiting for him as before. And even though a whole year had passed without Sri Krishna, the Lord of their life, and whose absence even a moment hung heavy as a year at other times, the Gopa boys, O Parikshit, regarded it as half a moment, infatuated as they were by the Maya of Sri Krishna. What do they not forget in this world, they whose mind stands deluded by Maya, infatuated by which the whole creation remains constantly forgetful of itself? And the friends of Sri Krishna said, it is well that you have come back with great expedition. Not a morsel has been swallowed by us. Come this side and dine to your heart's content. Thereupon Sri Krishna, the ruler of the senses, laughed a hearty laugh, took his meal with the boys, and showing them the skin of the python, he returned from the forest to Vraja. The skin of the python was in reference to, they had originally set out to go look at the rotting corpse of Aghasura, who Krishna had slain in the forest. So they went and looked at it and then went home. His person picturesquely decked with the plume of a peacock and blossoms and painted with fresh minerals, full of joy at the shrill notes of flutes, whistles of leaves and horns, and lovingly shouting to his calves, Sri Krishna, whose very sight brought delight to the eyes of gopis, entered Vraja, his purifying glory being sung all the way by his followers. Today a large serpent has been killed, and ourselves saved from it by this son of Yashoda and Nanda, so did the Gopa boys proclaim in Vraja. The king Parikshit said, pray tell me, O Holy One, how was such a love possible for Sri Krishna, born of another, as did not flow before even towards children sprung from themselves? He's referring to that when, in the previous discourse, Brahma, to challenge Krishna and essentially test him, because he wasn't sure of Krishna's nature, stole away the Gopa boys. Krishna recreated all the Gopa boys from himself in perfect replicas, and lived as all of them for a year without anyone knowing, even their own parents, because he made exact replicas of all of their bodies and all of their minds. But their parents loved them more than they had their original real children, not even knowing why they had felt a sudden increase of love. But of course, it was because they were directly interacting with all of them now avatars of Krishna for the space of that year. So the nature of that change in emotion is what Parikshit is asking about. Sri Shuka replied, to all created beings, O protector of men, their own self alone is dear. Others, such as one's progeny and wealth, are dear only because of the latter being loved by one's own self, or because of the connection to one's own self. Therefore, O King of Kings, the same love as is seen in the heart of embodied beings severally for their own self, they do not have for their son, wealth, house, etc., which are regarded as their own. In other words, yes, they do love their children or so on, but they love their children because they are their children, because of the connection to self. They don't have the same love for someone else's children. Even in the eyes of men who speak of the body alone as their own self, O jewel among the kshatriyas, those that are connected with the body are, as a matter of fact, not so supremely dear as their own body. If even the body, which is ordinarily regarded as one's own self, comes to be recognized as a result of deep thinking as one's own, it would not then be loved like the self, whereas previously the desire to survive was very keen even when the body was worn out. Therefore, one's own self is supremely dear to all embodied beings. The whole of this creation, mobile as well as immobile, is loved for the sake of the self alone. Know this Krishna to be the self of all living beings. For the good of the world, even he appears through his Maya like one invested with a body. In the eyes of those who know Sri Krishna in reality as the cause of the universe, everything mobile and immobile in this world is a manifestation of the Lord. There is nothing other than him here. And thus one can truly love everything as oneself, understanding that everything is oneself. The essence of all things lies in their cause, and Lord Sri Krishna is the ultimate cause of the latter. What substance other than him may be affirmed? With them who have sincerely taken refuge in the boat-like feet of Lord Sri Krishna of sacred renown, feet which are tender as a fresh leaf and are the goal of the great, the ocean of mundane existence is reduced to the footprint of a calf. Vaikunta becomes their abode, and the world of miseries ceases. What I was asked by you on the subject has all been narrated by me, how that which had been done by Sri Hari during his childhood was proclaimed on all sides during his boyhood. A man hearing or reciting this story of what was done by Sri Krishna, the slayer of Mura, in the company of his playmates, the destruction of the demon Agha, his dining on the grass, his assuming forms which were other than phenomenal, and the grand hymn of praise sung by Brahma, the birthless one, would attain all his desired ends. Thus Balarama and Sri Krishna passed their childhood in Vraja in childlike leelas, such as hide and seek, construction of dams, and jumping about like monkeys. Thus ends the 14th discourse, entitled Brahma Extols the Lord, in the first half of Book 10 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 15, the demon Dhenuka slain. Sri Shuka began again. And then, having attained boyhood in Vraja, the two brothers were approved by Nanda and others for taking up the work of tending the cows, the adult cows, not just the calves, because the boys have gotten big enough. There's a footnote quoting a verse from the Padma Purana to add a little bit more detail to this, saying, the 8th day of the bright half of Kartika, the lunar month of Kartika, is remembered by the wise as Gopashtami. From that day forward, Lord Sri Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, passed as a cowherd. Before this, he was a mere keeper of calves. So it marks that the date of when he was put in charge of adult cows was on the 8th day of the waxing Kartika moon. While grazing the cows in the company of their playmates, they rendered Vrindavana most sacred by their footprints. Surrounded by Gopas, who were singing his praises, and accompanied by Balarama, Sri Krishna, who was eager to sport, entered the said woodland of Vrindavana, the storehouse of blossoms and good for the cattle, driving the cows before him and playing on his flute. Observing the woodland full of bees, beasts, and birds, making delightful sounds, fanned by a breeze blowing over a pond whose water was clear as the mind of an exalted soul, and wafting the fragrance of lotuses, the Lord made up his mind to play there. Perceiving at every step trees whose boughs were touching the feet with the heavy load of their fruits and flowers, as well as with the wealth of their ruddy leaves, and smiling as it were with joy, the said Sri Krishna spoke to his elder brother Balarama. The glorious Lord said, "Oh, for the elimination of their stupidity, by which was brought about their birth in the vegetable kingdom, these trees, O chief of the gods," he addresses Balarama as O chief of the gods, "bow with their boughs to your lotus feet, adored even by the immortals, bringing for you offerings in the shape of flowers and fruits. These bees, O most ancient person, resort to you at every step, singing your glory that is capable of purifying all the worlds. In all probability, they are hosts of hermits, the foremost among your devotees, who do not forsake you, their deity, though concealed in the forest, O sinless one. These peacocks, O praiseworthy one, dance in joy. The she-deer, like the cowherd women, bring delight to you with their glances, and the flocks of cuckoos extend welcome to you, arrived at their home, with their sweet notes. Blessed are these denizens of the forest, for such is the nature of the righteous. Blessed today is this earth, no less than the blades of grass and plants that kiss your feet, the trees and creepers touched by your nails, while their leaves and flowers are plucked by you, the rivers and mountains, the birds and beasts regarded by you with kindly looks, and the cowherd damsels pressed by you to your bosom, which is coveted even by Sri, the goddess of beauty and prosperity. Sri Shuka continued, delighted thus at heart at the sight of the glorious Vrindavana, Sri Krishna, with his followers the Gopas, diverted himself while pasturing his cattle on the riverbanks in the vicinity of the mountain Govardhana. Adorned with a garland and accompanied by Sankarshana, another name of Balarama, he sometimes sang in the midst of humming bees, blinded with intoxication. The bees were so blinded, his exploits being celebrated by his followers. Now he uttered a shrill cry in imitation of the crying of swans, while at other times he danced in front of a dancing peacock, delighting it thereby. In a voice sonorous like the rumbling of clouds and fascinating to the cows and the gopas, he would sometimes lovingly call cows that had strayed far away by their names. He imitated the cries of chakoras, gronchas, chakravakas, the bharadvajas, and peacocks. These are all different species of birds. And now in the midst of animals, he would behave like one afraid of the tiger and the lion. At times he would himself refresh Balarama, exhausted with play and lying with his head placed on the pillow-like lap of a cowherd, by massaging his feet and other services. With their hands clasped together, the two brothers sometimes laughed and applauded at the Gopa boys when the latter danced, sang, ran, or wrestled with one another. Overcome with fatigue and combat, he sometimes lay down in beds of tender leaves, prepared by his playmates, at the foot of a tree, with his great head placed in the pillow-like lap of a Gopa. Some boys massaged the feet of that great soul, while other sinless ones cooled him with fans made of leaves. With their mind steeped in love, O great king, others would gently sing songs befitting the occasion and pleasing to the mind of the great soul. With his reality thus fully concealed by his own deluding potency, and imitating the ways of a cowherd boy by his conduct, Sri Krishna, whose tender feet are caressed by Rama, the goddess of prosperity, and who would behave as the Almighty Lord, sported like a rustic in the company of rustics. One cowherd boy, Sri Dama by name, a friend of Balarama and Sri Krishna and other Gopas, the foremost among them being Subala and Stoka Krishna. Those are the two other foremost of their friend group, lovingly spoke to them. So Sri Dama said, O mighty armed Balarama, O delighter of all, O Krishna, the destroyer of the wicked, not very far from this place there lies a very extensive forest, thick with rows of palmyra trees. A footnote here tells us that the site of this particular forest being referred to is known. It is located in the southwest of Mathura at a distance of 8 miles from Govardhana Hill. It's called Talsi or Tarpara. Plenty of fruits lie fallen there and continue to fall, but they are guarded by the wicked Dhenuka. He is a demon of great prowess disguised as a donkey, O Rama, O Krishna, and is surrounded by many other donkeys equal in strength to him. The forest is therefore never resorted to, O slayer of foes, by a man afraid of that demon who has tasted human flesh. Nay, it is shunned even by herds of cattle and flights of birds. The fruits have never been tasted before and are sweet smelling. Their delicious smell, which has spread all round, can be directly perceived even here. O Krishna, make them available to us, whose mind has been lured by their odor. Great is our longing. O Rama, let us go there if it pleases you. The two almighty lords heartily laughed to hear the above prayer of their friends, and accompanied by the Gopas, proceeded to that forest of the palmyra trees, with intent to oblige their loving companions. Entering the forest and thoroughly shaking the palm trees on all sides with both his arms, Balarama, like the heart of an elephant, like the young of an elephant, caused their fruits by sheer strength to fall down. I think these being sweet-smelling fruits from palm trees are probably some sort of grove of date palms. Hearing the sound of the falling fruits, the demon in the guise of a donkey rushed towards Balarama, making the earth's surface quake, along with mountains. Coming up to great speed, the powerful demon struck Balarama in the chest with both of his hind legs, and giving forth a harsh cry, the wicked fellow ran hither and thither. Coming up again in a rage, and standing with its back turned towards Balarama, the donkey kicked up its hind heels in violent anger against him, O king. This time, seizing it by the forepart of its feet with one hand and whirling it, Balarama dashed it against the foot of a palmyra tree. The demon, having given up the ghost, not even when hitting the tree, but in the process of whirling. In other words, that Balarama, with his pretty much limitless strength, whipped the demon in the air so fast that it just instantly died of the whiplash before it even was thrown into the tree. Shaking when struck by that carcass, the huge palm tree with its extensive top crashed, shaking the adjoining tree. The latter fell down, shaking another, and that too came down, shaking a fourth. Hit by the tree which was struck by the carcass of the donkey, dashed in sport by Balarama, all the palm trees shook as if swept by a hurricane wind. This was indeed no miracle on the part of the almighty Balarama, who was no other than Lord Ananta, the serpent god, the ruler of the universe, in whom this universe is woven warp and woof, as a piece of cloth in the threads, O dear one. Their relation having been killed, the other donkeys, the kindred of Dhenuka, all then rushed in fury towards Sri Krishna and Balarama too. Sri Krishna and Balarama, O protector of men, playfully dashed them against the palm trees, seizing them by their hind heels even as they came rushing towards them. Scattered over with heaps of fruit, as well as with the carcasses of the demons, along with the tops of the palm trees, the earth shone like the vault of the heavens, overcast with clouds. Observing that very great feat of the two brothers, the gods and others, such as the Vidyadharas and the Charanas, types of celestial bards, poured down showers of flowers, sounded musical instruments, and uttered praises. Henceforth, in that forest that had now been rid of Dhenuka and his demon kin, men fearlessly ate at the palm fruits, and the cattle grazed on the pasture land. Being glorified by his followers, the Gopa boys, and accompanied by Balarama, his elder brother, Sri Krishna, whose eyes were large as the petals of a lotus, and the hearing and recital of whose glory brings punyam, returned to Vraja. The cowherd women with eager eyes went forth in a body to meet Sri Krishna, who had the plume of a peacock and wild flowers fastened to his curly locks, soiled with the dust raised by the hoofs of cows, who had charming eyes and wore a winsome smile, who was playing on his flute, and his glory was being sung by his followers. Drinking with their bee-like eyes the honey-like beauty of the lotus face of Sri Krishna, the bestower of moksha, the women of Vraja dismissed the agony born of their separation during the daytime, when he was off in the forest. And Sri Krishna entered Vraja, duly receiving their homage, which took the form of sidelong glances accompanied by bashful smiles and modesty. Yashoda and Rohini, who were so fond of their sons, provided them with excellent food and raiment suited to the occasion and according to the latter's wishes. Relieved of their fatigue caused by their excursion to and back from the woods, by bath and massage, etc., the two brothers put on a charming loincloth, were adorned with an exquisite garland and sandal paste, ate the delicious fare brought by the mothers, and fondled by them, they lay down to rest in their excellent bed, and slept comfortably in Vraja. Thus rambling in Vrindavana, the aforesaid Lord Sri Krishna went to the bank of the Kalindi, which is another name for the river Yamuna, so named because of its beautiful dark-colored waters in this part of the river, accompanied by his playmates, to the exclusion of Balarama, O Parikshit. In other words, Balarama wasn't with them on this particular day. Oppressed with the summer heat and tormented with thirst, the cows as well as the cowherds presently drank of the unhealthy water of that part of the river, which had been contaminated with poison. Having sipped that poisoned water, their judgment vitiated by an evil destiny, they all fell dead by the side of the water, O jewel of the Kurus. Finding them reduced to that condition, Sri Krishna, the supreme lord of masters of yoga, fully restored them to life by his mere gaze that showered amritam, since he was their only protector. Having forthwith regained their consciousness, they rose up from the brink of the water, and staring at one another, all stood amazed. They took it to be a result of the gracious look of Sri Krishna, the protector of cows, or Gopala, O Parikshit, that having drunk poison and fallen dead, they should rise again. Thus ends the 15th discourse, entitled The Demon Dhenuka Slain, in the first half of Book 10 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. So it's been kind of established in previous discourses as well that by this point, the boys who witness most of Krishna's impressive leelas, who are with him on his adventures in the forest, pretty much understand who he really is. They basically, they may not understand specifically who is he an avatar of and so on, but they basically get that he's seems to be omnipotent. Whereas the adults back in the village are kind of starting to get there, but they don't realize it as much. They've realized that he does have supernatural powers and is not an ordinary human, but they still worry about him and regard him as vulnerable and limited. At least most of them do. Mainly because they haven't witnessed firsthand nearly as many of his exploits as the boys do who go with him. Discourse 16, the deliverance of Kaliya. Sri Shuka began again. Finding the Krishna with a long A at the end, in this context, is another name of the Yamuna River, named for being very dark. The Yamuna, the Kalindi, or the Krishna. She has many names. She, the river, is a goddess, and so has numerous names, as they all do. Finding the Krishna poisoned by a black snake and seeking its purification, Sri Krishna, the Almighty Lord, expelled the said serpent. The king Parikshit said, "Pray tell me, O holy Brahmana, how was the Lord able to subdue the snake that had taken up its abode there for a number of yugas?" Shuka hadn't said anything about that, so presumably Parikshit has heard this story before and knows something about the backstory to it. Under the fathomless water of the Yamuna, and how, as a matter of fact, he continued to be there for such a long period. O sage, who would feel sated while drinking the nectar in the form of the charming narrative of the aforesaid infinite Lord acting according to his own will and playing the role of a cowherd boy? Sri Shuka resumed. In the bed of the Kalindi, there was a certain pool inhabited by the serpent Kaliya, whose water was being constantly boiled by the fire of its poison, and into which birds flying over it fell down, stunned by the toxic fumes that rise from that pool. Touched by the wind which blew over the ripples of that poisoned water and was surcharged with its spray, living beings, mobile as well as immobile, standing on its brink, met their death. In other words, plants right along the edge of the pool had died. Those are the immobile beings thus referred to. Observing that the strength of the snake lay in its poison, possessed of tremendous force, and finding the river contaminated by the serpent, Sri Krishna, the very purpose of whose avatarana was the subjugation of the wicked, climbed up a very lofty kadamba tree, and having tightened the piece of cloth tied around his waist, and slapping his arms, which is this kind of like slapping of the arms is it's an Indian wrestler's gesture. It's a thing that Indian wrestlers traditionally do before a fight. So that's what Krishna is doing there. Jumped from that height into the pool of poisoned water. With the volume of its water swelled by the poison of the snakes that were agitated by the vehemence of the plunge taken by the Supreme Person, the serpent's pool, whose terrible ripples had been colored by the action of the poison, overflowed in all directions and expanded to the extent of 100 bows. That was no miracle on the part of the Lord, who was possessed of infinite strength. In other words, that he just hit the water with such force that he caused a huge wave to splash out. Hearing the splash of water stirred up by the stout arms of the Lord, who is sporting in the pool like a large elephant, O dear Parikshit, and perceiving the violation of its abode at the latter's hands, and unable to brook it, the serpent approached the Lord. Biting hard in a rage in his vital parts, the Lord, who was charming to look at, delicate of body and bright as a cloud, who was distinguished with a golden streak on his chest, and was clad in yellow, whose countenance was lit up with a smile, and who was sporting fearlessly with his feet tender as the pericarp of a lotus. The snake enclosed him in its coils. Sore distressed to see him caught in the coils of a cobra, with no movement visible in his body. His loving, because he's so bound up, he can't move, wrapped around by it. His loving friends, the Gopas, who had dedicated to Sri Krishna their body, kinsfolk, wealth, wife, and luxuries. Of course, these are children, they don't have wives and so on, but it's a way of saying dedicated everything to him, that they care about nothing but him. And whose judgment had been clouded by sorrow, followed in succession by grief and fear, dropped down senseless. Lowing in utter distress, cows, bulls, and heifers stood as if weeping in great fear, with their eyes riveted on Sri Krishna. Meanwhile, most terrible and grave portents of three kinds, foreboding imminent danger, appeared on the earth in heaven and on the body of individuals, indeed in Vraja. Noticing then and coming to know of Sri Krishna having gone out to pasture the cows, unaccompanied by Balarama, the cowherds headed by Nanda felt agitated with fear. Concluding from those ill omens Sri Krishna to have met his death, the cowherds who did not know him in truth, and whose life was Sri Krishna, and on whom they had fixed their mind, were overwhelmed with sorrow, grief, and fear. Possessing the affection of a cow and thirsting to behold Sri Krishna, they all, even the children, the aged, and the women, O dear Parikshit, issued forth from Gokula into the forest, distressed in mind. Seeing them so perplexed, Lord Balarama, a scion of Madhu, heartily laughed and said nothing, knowing as he did the glory of Sri Krishna, his younger brother. Searching for their beloved Krishna along the track indicated by his footprints, bearing the characteristic marks of the Almighty Lord, they headed towards the bank of the Yamuna. This is a reference to the fact that the soles of Krishna's feet bear certain marks. Elsewhere, possibly in the Bhagavatam, definitely in the Padma Purana, a detailed description of them is given. But in any case, it gives him, if he's barefoot, which he is, it gives him very distinctive footprints if they're in mud or something that'll hold the imprint very clearly. So they're able to track him with great confidence. Carefully observing at every step on the path trodden by the cows, footprints of Sri Krishna, distinguished, here's a list of some of the marks, distinguished by the marks of a lotus, barley seed, a goad, a thunderbolt, and a banner. So these artistic symbols are literally just like drawn into the soles of his feet like birthmarks. They marched with quick steps. Spying from a distance, Sri Krishna caught in the coils of a cobra and devoid of motion in the middle of the pool, and the Gopa boys lying senseless on the brink of the pool, and the cattle piteously crying all around. They felt sore afflicted and fell into a swoon. With their mind attached to Sri Krishna, the infinite Lord, and recalling his love, smiles, glances, and utterances, the Gopi women felt agonized with utmost sorrow when their most beloved one was entrapped by a snake and saw the three worlds desolate without their darling. Holding in check Yashoda, who had followed her child into the stream, Yashoda was starting to jump in to fight the Naga. And so some people had to grab her back because she certainly would have died, even of the poison before even getting to them. And shedding tears of grief, equally pained as they were, they recounted the stories of Sri Krishna, the beloved of Raja, and stood as though dead, with their eyes riveted on the countenance of Sri Krishna. Perceiving Nanda and others, whose very life was Sri Krishna, also proceeding to enter the pool, the aforesaid Lord Balarama, who knew the greatness of Sri Krishna, stopped them. Thus, finding the inhabitants of his Gokula exclusively dependent on him, and perceiving them along with their womenfolk and children sore distressed for his sake, Sri Krishna continued in that state, entrapped in the coils of the snake for about an hour, and then escaped from the bondage of the serpent. The serpent, whose own body was feeling oppressed by the expanding person of Sri Krishna, who grew in size and or perhaps in mass as part of escaping, now let him go, and holding up its hoods in a rage, stood hissing and breathing out poison through its nostrils and staring at him with eyes motionless and burning as a frying pan, and emitting flames through its mouths. In a sportive mood, Sri Krishna, like Garuda, wheeled round the snake that was licking both the corners of its mouths with its forked tongues, and was emitting a most terrible fire of poison through its glances. And the serpent too went round, waiting for an opportunity to bite him. Bending with his hands the serpent, whose energy had been spent through its whirling motion, yet whose heads continued to be uplifted, Sri Krishna, the most ancient person, the first teacher of all arts, leapt on its broad hoods and began to dance, his lotus feet turning crimson due to their contact with the multitudes of jewels on its hoods. Or in other words, being illuminated crimson as he dances over the top of these rubies set in the Naga's hoods. Perceiving him intent on dancing on that occasion, Gandharvas, Siddhas, Devas, Charanas, and Apsaras, who were all his servants, lovingly approached him all of a sudden with clay tom-toms, tabors and large drums, musical instruments and songs, flowers and other offerings and songs of praise. The Lord, who wielded a severe rod of punishment, so to speak, not a literal rod, but metaphorically wielded a severe rod of punishment, crushed under the tread of his feet whichever hood of the serpent that had 100 prominent heads and which kept on wheeling even though its life energy had almost been spent, would not bend, O dear king, ejecting deadly blood through its mouth and nostrils. The cobra fell into a deep swoon. Continuing to dance with untiring zeal, Sri Krishna, the most ancient person, subdued the cobra, successively bending under his foot whichever of the heads of the snake that was ejecting poison through its eyes and violently hissing in rage would raise itself. With his feet bespattered with drops of blood, the Lord appeared as though devoutly worshipped with flowers. With its umbrella-like hoods crushed by the Lord's weird dance, and its limbs shattered. Its limbs, evidently it's a snake, it doesn't have limbs, but its bones shattered. And spouting copious blood through its mouths, the serpent now thought of Lord Narayana, the most ancient person, the adored of the mobile as well as of the immobile creation, and mentally sought him as its protector. Distressed to perceive the snake sinking under the immense weight of Sri Krishna, who holds the numberless universes in his abdomen, and its umbrella-like hoods crushed under the strokes of his heels, its wives approached the Lord, the most ancient person, their clothes and ornaments as well as their hairbands falling in disorder, leading their children before them and stretching their body on the ground. Those chaste wives of the serpent presently bowed low to the aforesaid Sri Krishna, the protector of all created beings, with joined palms, and eager to secure the deliverance of their sinful husband, sought the Lord who affords protection to all as their refuge. The wives of the serpent prayed, "Just is the punishment meted out to this offender, for your avatarana on this earth is intended for chastising the wicked, and you regard your enemy as well as your own sons with an undifferentiating eye. You inflict punishment because you anticipate good results. This is a boon conferred on us by you, inasmuch as your punishment to the wicked indeed wipes out their sins, because it fulfills their negative karma. Your wrath itself is esteemed by us as a boon, and that it has rid our husband of the sin, as a result of which the state of a serpent was inflicted on this embodied soul. What austerities were rightly performed in a previous incarnation by this serpent, free from pride and bestowing honor on others, or else what religious act was done by him out of compassion for all created beings, by virtue of which you, the giver of life to all, have been pleased with him? We are unable, O Lord, to discover for what meritorious act has flowed to him the privilege of touching the dust of your feet, seeking which even Sri, jewel among women, whose favor is sought even by Brahma and other gods, practice austerities for a pretty long period, giving up all luxuries and observing sacred vows. Having secured the dust of your feet, people neither covet the uppermost heaven, nor the rulership of the entire globe, nor the position of Brahma, nor dominion over the subterranean regions, nor the mystic siddhis of yoga, nor even the final moksha, the cessation of rebirth. This Kaliya, born of Tamoguna and belonging to the race called the Krodhavashas. The Krodhavashas are a clan of both Nagas and Rakshasas. Their lineage overlaps, but in this case, a Krodhavasha Naga, has secured, O Lord, that dust which cannot easily be attained by others. To an embodied soul revolving in the whirligig of mundane existence and seeking this dust, the desired wealth becomes manifest. Hail to you, the infinite Lord, enshrined in hearts, the support of the elements, externally existent as the cause, the supreme spirit. Salutation to you, the absolute, the storehouse of knowledge and consciousness, devoid of attributes, immutable and endowed with infinite energy as the propeller of Prakriti. Hail to you, the time spirit, as well as the support of time, and the witness of the divisions of time, appearing in the form of the universe, as well as its seer, the maker of the universe, as well as its material cause. Salutation to you in the form of the gross and the subtle elements, the indriyas, the vital airs, the mind, the understanding, and the intellect. Salutation to you in the form of the ego, consisting of the three gunas, that has screened the realization of the jivas, constituting your rays. Salutation to you who are infinite, subtle, immutable, and omniscient, who are the subject of diverse theories and speculations, and who are manifested in the form of the name, the object named, and the power inherent in the name to denote a particular object. Hail to you, the root of the means of cognition, possessed of absolute knowledge, the source of the scriptures. Hail, hail to you, representing both worldly activity and withdrawal from it, in the form of the Vedas. Hail, hail to Sri Krishna, the protector of devotees, in the forms of Rama, Vasudeva, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Salutation to the illuminator of the inner sense, appearing in diverse forms after concealing himself behind the three gunas and indicated by the functions of the internal sense, their self-knowing witness. Let our salutation be to you, O ruler of the senses, whose glory cannot be comprehended through reasoning, who are the originator and revealer of all phenomena, who revel in your own self and are given to contemplation. Hail to you who know the condition of the high and the low, who preside over all, who lie beyond the universe and are the universe itself, the witness as well as the cause of the universe. Though destitute of desire, you actually bring about, O Lord, through the gunas, the creation, preservation, and dissolution of this universe, wielding as you do the eternal potency in the form of time, and awakening by your penetrating look the various dispositions already present and carrying on your Leela, which is never futile. All these forms in the three worlds, whether they are gentle, violent, or belonging to an ignorant species, pertain to you alone as described before. Of course, at present, the gentle ones are dear to you, since you have descended with intent to maintain the righteousness of the virtuous, and continue here with a view to protecting them. The fault once committed by his own dependent deserves to be forgiven by the master. Therefore be pleased, O tranquil-minded Lord, to pardon the offense of this stupid creature that does not know you. Be gracious, O Lord. The serpent is about to give up the ghost. Let our life in the form of our husband be vouchsafed to us women, deserving to be pitied by the righteous. Ordain what should be done by us, your maidservants, for one acting according to your command with reverence is surely rid of mundane existence. Sri Shuka continued, thus fervently praised by the serpent's wives, the aforesaid Lord spared the cobra that had fallen into its swoon, its hoods having been smashed with the blows of his heels. Having gradually recovered its senses and vitality, and breathing in the normal way with difficulty, the wretched Kaliya prayed to Sri Krishna with joined palms, evidently assuming, as Nagas often do, a partly human form, and thus having palms to join. We are wicked since birth, constituted as we are of predominantly tamoguna and possessed of lasting anger. The natural disposition of living beings, O Lord, which is responsible for their identification with the body, etc., is difficult to give up. This universe, O Lord, which is a diversified product of the three gunas, and is endowed with diverse peculiarities, bodily and organic strength, fecundity, power of procreation, latent desires, and external forms, has been evolved by you. And in that universe, we Nagas, O Lord, are most ferocious by birth. How can we get rid of your Maya, which is so difficult to escape by our own efforts, deluded as we are? In fact, you, the omniscient ruler of the universe, serve as an instrument in overcoming your Maya. Therefore, show your grace or mete out punishment to us as you think fit. Sri Shuka went on. Hearing this prayer, the Almighty Lord, who had assumed a human semblance on purpose, replied, you ought not to stay here, O Naga. Accompanied by your kinsfolk, progeny, and wives, proceed you to the ocean without delay. Let the river be used by the bovine race and human beings. The mortal who duly remembers this command of mine to you, reciting it both morning and evening, shall not have fear from you, Nagas. He who, having bathed in this pool, the scene of my Leela, propitiates the gods and others with its water, and observing a fast, offers worship to me, thinking of me all the time, is completely absolved of all sins. That Garuda, who is endowed with beautiful wings, for fear of whom you took shelter in this pool, leaving the island of Ramanaka, shall not devour you, marked as you are with my footprints. So in other words, leaving the island of Ramanaka, meaning that Garuda will never attack any Nagas on the island of Ramanaka. In other words, Krishna is giving this island as a refuge for Nagas. Sri Shuka continued, commanded thus by Lord Sri Krishna of wonderful deed, Kaliya, as well as his wives, devoutly worshipped him with joy by means of unearthly raiment, garlands, and gems, as well as with superb jewels, heavenly perfumes, sandal paste, and a large wreath of lotuses. Having worshipped Sri Krishna, the ruler of the universe, and propitiated the Lord whose banner bears the device of Garuda, and duly permitted by him, Kaliya thereupon went round him as a mark of respect and greeted him, and accompanied by his wives, kinsfolk, and sons, gladly withdrew to the island of Ramanaka in the ocean. So the tradition goes. Rid of poison, the water of the Yamuna presently became nectar-like again by the grace of the Lord, who had sportively assumed the semblance of a human being. Thus ends the 16th discourse entitled The Deliverance of Kaliya, in the first half of Book 10 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. And I think we can probably do one more because it pretty much is part of the same story and it's very short, just kind of like a slight PS to that one. Discourse 17, the Lord rescues the inhabitants of Raja from a wildfire. So the king Parikshit submitted, wherefore did Kaliya leave Ramanaka, the home of the Nagas, and what wrong was done by him alone to Garuda? In other words, why was Garuda so out to get him? Sri Shuka resumed, on every Amavasya, for their own protection, all the Nagas gave to the high-minded Garuda their own share of offerings, which was brought for them from month to month as previously arranged, to the foot of a tree at Ramanaka by the worshippers of the Nagas, who served food for the Nagas, O mighty armed, who served as food for the Nagas, and were consequently in constant terror of them, O mighty armed one. Puffed up with pride resulting from superabundance of venom and strength, however, Kaliya, son of Kadru, the mother of all the Nagas, would disregard Garuda and consume the offerings itself. Seized with wrath to hear this, the glorious Garuda, the favorite of the Lord, swooped on Kaliya with tremendous speed, with intent to make short work of him, O king. With his many hoods raised and his fiery eyes wide open, the cobra, which had poison for its weapon, advanced to meet Garuda, who was rushing with great speed, and bit Garuda hard with its fangs, using them as a weapon, wagging its fearful tongues. Pushing him back, the wrathful Garuda, son of Kashyapa, who serves as the seat of Lord Vishnu, the slayer of the demon Madhu, or Madhusudhana, and is possessed of a terrible speed and formidable prowess, struck the son of Kadru with his left wing, brilliant as gold. Beaten by the wing of Garuda, Kaliya felt extremely agitated and entered the aforesaid pool of the Kalindi, which was inaccessible to Garuda and could not be easily entered because he's a bird and it's underwater. In that pool, once upon a time, during the reign of Emperor Mandhata, Garuda forcibly carried away, though stopped by the sage Sobhari, an aquatic creature, his favorite food, hungry as he was. Seeing the fish sore afflicted and miserable, consequent on their leader having been killed, the sage Sobhari compassionately declared, with a view to ensuring the security of that pool against the onslaughts of Garuda, if entering this pool the famous Garuda eats the fish here, he will immediately be deprived of his life. I utter this truth. Kaliya alone was aware of this utterance. No other Naga knew it. Afraid of Garuda, he was living there and was now expelled from that pool by Sri Krishna. Finding Sri Krishna come out of the pool, adorned with an ethereal garland, bedaubed with a weird sandal paste, and clad in heavenly raiment, decked all over with a number of large gems and graced with gold ornaments, and he did not go into the pool wearing all that. All the cowherds rose even as the senses return on life being restored to them, and with their mind full of rapture, they hugged the Lord with great love. Meeting with Sri Krishna, Yashoda, and Rohini, Nanda, as well as the other Gopas and Gopis, O scion of Kuru, regained sensibility and had their desire fulfilled. And embracing Sri Krishna, the immortal Lord, Balarama, who knew his greatness, laughed. Mountains, cows, bulls, and calves derived supreme joy. Coming up to Nanda, the Brahmanas, including his well-known gurus with their wives, said, "Luckily, your son, who was seized by Kaliya, has been liberated. Bestow gifts on Brahmanas on the ground of Sri Krishna's deliverance." With a delighted mind, O king, Nanda thereupon gave them cows and gold. The highly blessed and virtuous Yashoda, too, who had recovered her lost child, hugged Sri Krishna and, placing him on her lap, shed tears of joy again and again. Oppressed with hunger and thirst and worn out with fatigue, O King of Kings, the inhabitants of Raja, as well as their cows, spent that night near the bank of the Kalindi, since by this time it was near nightfall and they didn't want to make a long journey back in the dark, back to Vrindavana village. In the course of that night, a wildfire that broke out in the forest, dried with the summer heat, surrounded the whole of Raja, meaning the whole of the group of people of Raja, lying asleep at midnight, and began to burn it. Being scorched, the said inhabitants of Raja rose bewildered from that place and sought Sri Krishna, the Almighty Lord, who looked like a human being through his Maya, as their refuge. They exclaimed, "O Krishna, the enchanter of all, O highly blessed one, O Rama of immeasurable prowess, this most terrible fire is actually consuming us who are yours. Protect us, your own friends, from the deadly fire which is most difficult to escape from. Protect us. We are unable to leave for your good feet, our fearless asylum." Observing the perturbation of his own people, as aforesaid, the infinite Lord of the universe swallowed up that fierce conflagration, possessed as he was of unlimited energy. Thus ends the 17th discourse, entitled Sri Krishna Rescues the Inhabitants of Raja from a Wildfire, in the first half of Book 10 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. And I think that is probably a good stopping point today. It's just about 10 a.m. And that part, I wanted to include that one because it wraps up the Kaliya story.
Sure. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all guys for coming.
Thank you. And Happy New Year to all of you.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Hare Krishna. Devla, thanks for doing this, even though you're not in, your full health right now.
Yeah. No, I feel pretty much fine. Yeah.
What happened
Good,
to you, Devala?
I have COVID right now.
What?
Yeah, I tested positive just the other day.
Where did you go?
Sorry, what?
No, where did you go?
Where did I go? Where I think I got it, you mean?
Yeah.
I think I got it doing martial arts training.
Oh,
Yeah, with some guys. Yeah,
nice.
probably from one of them. But yeah,
I could hear it in your voice. That's
Yeah.
why I turned on the video and I'm like, maybe you have a cold.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
What
You-
did
It was great. Did great.
What the tapas?
it's really not
Right.
bad. I have it really mildly.
You vaccinated, that's why, right?
Yeah, I did get, well, it was a little bit. At the start of the summer 2021, I got one shot of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And I hadn't gotten a booster since then. So technically vaccinated, but it was a while ago. But
Well, now you got a natural vaccine then.
yeah, right? Yeah.
But that was a combination, Bhagavatam and martial arts. That's nice, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've read that our own very Fairfield local Mike Dearborn. He's a
Yeah, I know Mike. All right.
viral YouTuber.
Yeah, he is.
With the name of Mike the Vegan, and he talks about how awesome and possible it is to be vegan.
Yeah.
And one of his
he's
episodes,
one of the biggest veganism YouTubers
Yep.
in all of YouTube. He's like really successful.
yeah, he's at least top 5 vegan YouTuber in the world.
Yeah.
And so he had a whole episode talking about a scientific study that proved that not vegans. His argument is that the study did not cover vegans; it covered vegetarians.
Right.
Were literally 60% less intense symptoms. If they got COVID, their symptoms were 60% less drastic or extreme.
Yeah, I could easily believe it. Of course, I mean, it's hard to separate out the factors because, people who have a specific diet like that, vegetarianism or veganism, are probably more health conscious people in general who
True.
take care of themselves in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, that
Yeah.
doesn't surprise me at all.
Interesting. Yeah. So God bless you, Matt. Fine.
Andy, would you be able to share his YouTube link? I would love to look at the study. And just piggybacking on you and Devala, the vegetarian diet is full of phytonutrients,
Mhm.
which is basically it provides the antioxidants and all that. So it does make a great sense. And I'm always looking into those studies, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'll just share it with the WhatsApp group, I guess, huh?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm okay if you want to just share independently or the WhatsApp
So you can
group.
share it. You could share it on the app. That would be fine. I would like to see it too. So we recently got to listen to Maharishi Ayurveda from Dr. Manhawar, and he was saying how fresh cooked food has the Vedic properties that enhances the totality of human consciousness. It was very nice. It was 1-2 hour long. It was so beautiful. I really enjoyed. I think you get to listen to him, no?
He's one of the professor for our course anyway.
I really like him.
Ayurvedic, yes. I mean, the wholeness as per the Panchamahabhuta, right? Like we all know that every single thing that we see and feel as a grossest manifestation of from the unmanifest is basically into the 5 elements, right? The Panchamahabhuta. And Panchamahabhuta is into every single thing. Like even my computer mouse has, more of the earth into it, but it does have all other elements, right? So, and we know that in our hands, right? Like we have Panchamahabhutas, right? Too, like as we say that the space, air, fire, water, earth, every food has Panchamahabhuta. It is what type of food you're going to choose to balance with the Panchamahabhuta in your body. That's the whole learning and understanding, and we spend our entire life into just adjusting it. So if you have that innate understanding of this is what we call in the harmony with the natural laws. So Panchamahabhuta in everything, Panchamahabhuta in us, but just being that alert and aware. This is why we do all these things, right?
Yeah.
That what, like say, for example, avocado has more of the earth, right? Because it's the solid oil, this, that. For anybody with the kapha prakriti, it's not good. Like yesterday, I wrote the whole article about, and I think I shared with some of my patients that the Google Doctor, all these studies, every single, I mean, I honor all these studies, but everything would say that this is a healthy food. But is that healthy food right for you?
Right.
So how do we understand that is through this whole Ayurvedic part of yoga, because Ayurveda is incorporated of yoga, and everything nails it down to the Panch Mahabhuta. So that wholeness, what we're talking about is also the interaction of us with other elements and just bringing that wholeness into it. It's kind of very simple when you just understand the core, but I guess we spend so much time and effort just proving what's already there.
Right.
I gave some great guidance to just without any money, you can just practice a couple of things and just at home, and then you can have a healthy lifestyle. And then he connected that with Jyotish and connected that with Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, I think verse 7, 8, 9, or 8, 9, 10, something like that, how food is, has to be sattvic and all that. It's very nice when you read all the literature and then they match, the information match. And then in Maharishi Ayurveda, they explain the main thing of martial Ayurveda is you go back to the self. And it doesn't make sense though that when you enhance the thinking, the cognition, that of course you want the best food, you want the sattvic food, and then the one thing he also said is not the quantity, but it's the quality of food, because people who eat a lot is basically they're not content. That's why they want that, getting fulfillment in food, something like that. So it was very nice. I mean, I cannot say that too much because it was a long lecture. It was too much beautiful knowledge, really nice knowledge.
So Devla, how are you managing your symptoms?
Oh, I'm fine. It's really mild.
Really?
Basically having the warm liquids, any of those herbal teas with the, I'm sure you're familiar with
like
the tulsi and the,
cinnamon. I love tulsi tea. I have a whole big bag of just like, not even like the prepackaged tulsi tea, but just like raw tulsi leaf that I just like.
Oh, you're fortunate.
Yeah,
you're lucky.
I have a bunch of it that I just kind of crush up and put in boiled water, and it's great. I love it.
Right. So, ginger, tulsi, things like that. That's basically what it is. Like when I had the active website at the beginning of the COVID, there was that one page that I wrote, right? Like prevention is the tons of a cure. And that was a one page because that's when we had the whole COVID started. It had just a 10 steps basic. Some of them were just this thing. That page has never changed from day one to now. And personally, I had COVID twice because I'm always among the patients.
Right.
The first time I had it was actually when we didn't have any diagnostic testing. And I was actually traveling. Yes, that was early December of 2019 in Florida, when we had a lot of undiagnosed cases, and I was one of them. And I was actually traveling. So that, and then I had the end of 2020 also. So I took my Johnson & Johnson just as a sake of taking it because we are healthcare providers, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So, but naturally, you do build up the viral load. So, you just do it your way. Yeah. And it'll be great. Right.
Nice.
Yeah. So it was nice. And thank you, Andy, for sharing. Devla, for sharing. Nice seeing you, Vasudji.
Yeah, nice seeing you all.
Fun stories today. Fun Krishna stories.
Jai Shri Krishna and Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Have a nice, healthy, happy, blissful life.
Thank you. You too. You too, all of you.
So
thank you.
That gesture of the Indian wrestlers, I kind of remember from when we used to do the plays, right?
Oh, yeah.
So of course, they do it up here this way, but they did it this way,
the slapping
and on the thighs.
The thighs too, yeah. That's such a classic Indian wrestler thing.
It's
Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
All right.
Jai Shri Hari.
Yep. Jai Shri
Oh, there's another Ekadashi coming up for everybody. Was it Thursday or something like that throughout the world? It's according to ISKCON. It's all throughout the world. Thursday, January 13th, coming up.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for always keeping us updated. Thank you.
All right.
I will leave. Right. Thank you again, and Happy New Year to all of you, and speedy recovery, Devla.
Thanks. Yeah.